Hey, I'm Chris Cuomo, and we need to get after the game tonight. Leland Vittert just said, you can change perception, you can't change reality. The part he's missing is, in politics, perception is reality. And nothing changes if nothing changes. We have to see the problem, and it exists on all sides. Is it time to admit that Supreme Court justices are as political as anyone else in the process? 2 points. It's not a coincidence that the choices of each party vote with the politics of that party so often that we know the names of the justices that ever break the pattern. We also know there's a reason both parties allow proposed justices to not do what? Answer any questions in the confirmation process about their opinions or politics. What do they say? Well, I can't tell you if I would change the law on that. It is stare decisis, to be decided. It's decided. Yeah, until they decide to change it. They don't not answer questions because they're objective or they're above opinion, but it's just to keep the game going. It is a sham process, the confirmation process. And we all know it, and so do the parties. They just agree to allow the rules to be that no one answers any questions. So you can just get it in there on the numbers. How do we know? How many judges have failed to make the grade through the confirmation process? Like 2 in recent history, right? Robert Bork, many years ago. Why? Because he was honest about his opinions and his politics and his ideas about jurisprudence. That cemented the standard of having all future nominees duck the questions. And then Merrick Garland, which had nothing to do with him. It was just a poison political play that Senator McConnell all but admitted. So now we have Justices Thomas and Alito. They're both blaming obvious conservative political leanings on their wives. Thomas's wife is all wrapped up in Trump land, January 6th intrigue. Now you have Justice Alito. He's got the U.S. flag in distress outside his house. He's got this other flag that's used by Christian conservatives. He says, oh, it's my wife. It's my wife. Should these two stay out of Trump-related matters? Should they step down? What is to be done about obvious inadequacies? More game. If the Democrats don't want the New York Trump cases to reek of politics, stop making them political. The district attorney, Alvin Bragg, campaigned on getting Trump and then went after him on a case that was passed over by the feds. Now comes AOC, celebrated fringe figure for the progressive left, celebrating the New York cases as a ball and chain around Trump's ability to campaign. That's why people think the cases are political, because of what you say about them. So what is to be done? Let's debate these 2 propositions. Host of the Aggressive Progressive podcast and NewsNation political contributor Chris Hahn, and host of the Ben Ferguson Show, Ben Ferguson. It's good to see you both. Ben, I'll start with you. You can say these same things that I'm saying about Alito and Thomas about justices on the left as well. That's why they vote with the parties that put them there. But is it time to correct it, Ben? Is it time to say, look, you can blame your wives, but obviously you have Trump sympathies. You should not be involved in the cases that involve Trump.
Look, I think jurors obviously have opinions, and I think there's obviously people that run the courts and the Supreme Court all the way down that have opinions. Their job, though, is to look at the law and look at what the law says and apply the law equally and not put their opinion in those decisions. And look, if Alito's wife did this because there was an argument with a neighbor, I have no reason to believe that that story isn't true or accurate. I have no problem with that. And at the same time, when you had Ruth Bader Ginsburg that went after Donald Trump in 2016 and went after him before then, and then even in her chambers of the Supreme Court, attacked Donald Trump in 2016 when he was running for president. Was that inappropriate for a Supreme Court justice to do that? I would say yes. It was probably extremely inappropriate because now you're trying to influence an election. That's where you have to draw that line there and say, look, You need to stay out of the politics of this. I also don't think that your family should be muzzled. I think if you're a politician, whether your kid's a conservative or a liberal, your family should be able to say what they want. They shouldn't be put in jail because of your position. And so I have no problem with that. But I do think there is a little bit of hypocrisy here. People freaking out over this flag and a wife that was involved with an argument with another neighbor and some nasty things they said when they didn't say anything about Ginsburg when she was attacking Donald Trump.
Listen, I'm with you. The two parties only play to advantage. But here's the problem with Ben's point, Chris, that I want you to take on. This current court pushed up the immunity case. They didn't have to do that. And it does stink of politics to me. And I believe Ben's point, or I agree with it, that it happens on both sides. To my initial introduction, they vote with the party that put them there so often, you know the names of the ones that break ranks. Is it time to just call it what it is, Chris?
Yeah, and I think it's time that the Supreme Court maybe has some new rules, maybe some term limits, maybe a code of ethics. I think it cheapens the court. When I was a law student at St. John's and I was studying the court's decisions, you didn't really see the politics back then. And now it's very crystal clear. And I got to tell you, it stinks, and the American people are tired of it. And frankly, I don't think it's good for the institution that justices are talking about politics at all, even when their family is, when it rubs off on them in ways. And if their family wants to be engaged in a political process, then it is incumbent on the judges to pull themselves out of any cases regarding that, whether they are a Democrat or a Republican appointee. I just don't like what I'm seeing on the court right now. I think Alito, Thomas have been horrible examples of this over the last couple of years. And I think it's time, if the court won't act on its own, Congress needs to act. And frankly, I think we need a constitutional amendment. I think lifetime appointment was great if you skinned your knee.
You're not getting a constitutional amendment. Chris, you're not getting a constitutional amendment.
You know what?
We couldn't get a constitutional amendment that the name of this country is America, okay? We're not getting a constitutional amendment about anything right now. Ben, what's your point?
Yeah, let me also say this. The problem with what he just said and what drives me insane is it's very clear that this is an opportunity that the left sees to remake the Supreme Court and to then stack the court and then put limits on the court and all this. That doesn't fix any of these problems. It's just because the court right now is more conservative. They now want to stack the court and change the court, undermine the court. And if you want to talk about order here, let's not forget that there was somebody at the Supreme Court that leaked the Roe v. Wade decision. And then there were people that were going to the Supreme Court justice homes to intimidate and try to change their decision. And no one got arrested. And you're telling me that we couldn't find the leaker? Give me a break.
Hold on, Ben. Alito, it was Alito's office that did.
We know Sam Alito. Alito leaked it.
He
was trying to pin in the other conservatives.
I go back to what I said here. I go back there. Did they ever find the person that leaked the decision? Yes or no?
Look, everything that we saw was that it came from Alito's chamber. That Alito had it, and then it got out.
And the fact that did we know the person who did it? We don't. You're telling me, with all the investigative power that we have in this country, you can't find out the person that leaked that and then put the justices in harm's way?
Listen, I'll tell you what.
Is the one responsible for their own investigation, and they ain't doing it.
Hold on, fellas. I want to move on, but let me just say something. It is not a good argument to balance the wrongdoing. Ben, that's what you're doing. I don't like the hypocrisy. I see it on the left.
I don't like the undermining of the court. When the court just had something that happened that should have never happened.
But here's the thing, Ben.
And they did it to change the court's decision.
Ben, that's not true. The leak was done.
They leaked it so they would change the decision.
No, that's not true.
No.
Look, Ben, there's no proof of that.
Why did they leak it?
All I'm saying.
Why did they leak it?
All
why
I'm
did
saying
all
is
the
this.
protesters go to their house? Why did someone try to kill
I think
Alito
leaked it. My opinion is that Alito leaked it to front run it to let the temperature come down by the time it was released.
Absolutely.
That's what I think it was. But also, hold on. I'm just saying this. The problem exists on both sides with these justices. The sham has to be exposed, at least in the confirmation process. These men and women have to give answers to questions about their politics.
Chris, we've never had this conversation before until the court was conservative, and now everybody
Not
was
true.
like, "Oh, it's a sham."
Not
it's
true.
A sham.
Not true.
You guys
Not
are
true.
getting beat at the Supreme Court,
God.
so now
the
you don't like
Republican
the
agenda
Supreme
for the last
Court.
50 years was about
not
the
true. I've been
was
saying
about
it.
the court, about the politicization of the court. It was how
I've been
Republicans
saying
ran for the last 3 decades.
I've been saying it. I've been saying it. Ben, I've been saying it. You're right. The Democrats don't like it. They did want to pack the court. I'm not in favor of that. You're not going to get a constitutional amendment. But I do think you should change the confirmation process. And I do think the men and women who get nominated should give real answers to real questions. And then we'll judge whether or not they can keep their opinions to themselves when they look at the law. But to pretend that they don't have opinions is nonsense. Next topic. The next topic is this. I broke my IFB. That's how crazy you guys are. You guys make me crazy. Here's the next topic. AOC, okay? Play the clip of AOC while I fix my IFB. This drives me crazy. Watch this.
And the man practically has the legal version of an ankle bracelet around him, and he can't leave the 5 boroughs because he always has to be in court.
All right, so my question is this.
Yes.
My question is this. I can hear you. My question is this. Chris Hahn, if you don't want people to perceive these New York cases as political, don't say stupid political like she just did. Don't say that these cases are an albatross or a chain around us. This is why people think they're political.
Yeah, I think she was trolling him a little bit, looking to get a rise out of him. And, you know, look, he can leave
honest.
New York. He's got a private plane. Look, he's got a private plane. He could be campaigning after court if he had the energy to do it. I don't think he does. I also think he's kind of lazy. He doesn't really campaign. He does these big rallies. He doesn't do the work. And frankly, when elections are won by 100,000 votes in 5 states,
Tell her to
stop.
Tell her to stop hurting your party. Tell her to stop hurting your party. And Ben, let me tell you something. You should love this. You should love this, Ben Ferguson.
Dude,
because they did you a huge favor. Because the first case that came up should have been the Georgia case. And we would be having a very different national conversation about where the line is, about how dirty we want our politics to be. They did you a favor bringing these New York cases first. Yes or no?
There's 2 things I'll say. I love AOC. I think she's the best thing that ever happened to conservatives because she's totally insane and she'll actually say what the other Democrats are thinking, but she just says it. It's election interference. She's saying it's election interference, and that's why they did this case in the first place. The second thing for the Georgia case, I'd have no problem with that one going first. The problem was the scumbags down there hired their lovers and funneled hundreds of thousands of dollars to them. So again,
that's a distraction.
That's exactly what happened. That is exactly what happened. You know it. It's not a distraction.
No. Here's
that's
what
why
happened.
The case has been delayed.
Here's what happened. Here's what happened. Trump was told by 3 or 4 people, you're not going to win Georgia. He said, get them on the phone. He then got on the phone and said, find me the votes. That's what happened. And we both know it. And if Biden did it, you'd be going crazy.
I couldn't disagree with you more in the way you're characterizing that phone call. But I'll go back to what I said a moment ago. Democrats
you can disagree.
Need to understand that the lawless, that this idea of lawfare, that you can go after your political opponent, threaten to take away his property, threaten to go into their houses and place things like they did at Mar-a-Lago, have a kill order, for goodness sakes, the FBI yesterday.
They placed things at Mar-a-Lago.
Hold on. I'm doing a segment on this.
To use deadly force.
Hold on, Ben Ferguson. Ben Ferguson. Here's the fact. The standard of use of force as briefed in the preliminary action to that search was no different than any other search. You guys are twisting it for advantage, Chris, and you know it.
I'll say this. I think if you're dealing with a president of the United States of America and Secret Service, it ain't normal, Chris. There is a different level that you should be looking at that,
Ben,
and you know that.
You wanted him to get a break.
You wanted him to get a break,
and they already gave him a break
2 years ago.
It's not a
break. They were. Please, when can you give us back the information? What are they supposed to do, Ben? Ben, he wasn't cooperating with law enforcement because he doesn't respect law enforcement. He doesn't respect anyone who is not kissing up to him.
Official that walks up to him and takes a picture with him. You're lying.
Mike Pence, no search.
Law enforcement loves him.
I'm not lying.
Mike Pence,
he doesn't care about them
Mike
either.
Pence,
He's spitting
no
their face
search.
if he needed to.
Mike Pence, no search. Joe Biden, no search. Donald Trump, he does this. So he gets the search, but they had no standard of use of force that was special for him. I'm doing a segment on it with an FBI pro who is going to lay it out for us. But last point before we go. The New York cases are a gift to the Republicans. Donald Trump coming out and saying, yeah, maybe I'll be against contraception is a gift to you, Chris Hahn. What does this mean for reproductive rights in this election?
I mean, look, does he want to lose? Because this is the kind of issue we should bring up, because I think most people want to have sex and not have a kid every time they do it. I don't know about you, Ben, but I know for me, that's how I like it, and I think most of America likes it. And I think it's a ridiculous thing. It's going to bring people out in droves against him. It's going to go right along with the choice thing. And quite frankly, it dovetails into the Supreme Court issue, because it's going to draw attention to the fact that if Trump gets 2 more appointees, your contraception rights are going to be taken away, just as your right to choose was.
It's not true.
Ben, last
Chris,
word.
If you looked at the interview, he was asked a question early in the interview about one of the 2 drugs that are used when it comes to medical abortions. Yeah. And he was answering that question. He has never in his life said he was against contraceptions. He came out and clarified it again. This is BS news stories because you guys are obsessed with Roe v. Wade, trying to make this the issue of the election. I understand it. It's a savage, soulless political move that may work with some people. But if you actually care about truth, you look at what Trump said in the interview, and it's very clear he's not advocating for getting rid of contraceptives.
Ben, 2 things, and then I got to go. 1, taking a pill the day after you have sex is not an abortion, okay? 2, he was asked specifically about forms of contraception. He was not being careful. He was not being discreet. He was saying what the base wants him to say, like you. And it's an interesting play. Reproductive rights is not an ugly, twisted thing. And if you keep saying that, you better hope it's not echoed by your candidate, or you're going to have a tough day in November.
When you lie about what a candidate says and you say that he's talking about something he wasn't.
They learned nothing.
That's what he was asked about.
You learned nothing.
But look, well, let's keep the I have a soundbite, but I'm not going to play it. It was open-ended. Everybody can check it for themselves, but that's not the point. The point is we'll see how it plays. I love the conversation. Let's keep it going. Ben Ferguson, for some reason, when I'm looking at you, that's your chair behind you, right? At first, when I looked, I thought you had a lanyard behind you and a hat. I was like, look at this guy with his hat. Anyway, it's good to see you, Ben, as always. Chris Hahn, thank you very much.
See you guys.
No, I thought he had like a hat back there. He's a good man. Thanks to both of you. All right? I'll talk to you soon. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, 4 minutes, 5 seconds. You know, I've known Ben for so long. He just doesn't age. But we've been having conversations for like a decade. All right. Now, when we come back, this issue, it matters. It matters to make it straight. All right? Did the FBI have special rules for the search on Mar-a-Lago? Did the FBI have a special plan that they could use deadly force specific to this search? The answer is next. Do something here at NewsNation, but specifically on our show here. You're not going to change a lot of people's minds, okay? But it is important that you have a sense of what is reasonable in situations, because so much of this comes at you, right? There's so much noise when you're in the wrong company or the wrong conversation starts up. So it's important when something can be set straight, it should. There is controversy around this Trump campaign email and a Truth Social post where Trump claims that Biden gave permission to the FBI to use deadly force during their search of Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate for classified documents. Now, remember, they only searched because Trump refused to comply. They didn't search Pence. They didn't search Biden. They complied. He asked for this, okay? So that's the only reason they searched. It was not a raid. I talked to people involved with the planning, okay? They went as easy as they could, given what they needed to execute. This is how the instruction read in an email to Trump supporters. Biden's DOJ was authorized to use deadly force for their despicable raid at Mar-a-Lago. You know, they're just itching to do the unthinkable. Joe Biden was locked and loaded, ready to take me out and put my family in danger. Trump also posted on Truth Social, Crooked Joe Biden's DOJ and their illegal and unconstitutional raid of Mar-a-Lago authorized the FBI to use deadly, lethal force. That means the same thing. I guess he doesn't know that. Now we know for sure that Joe Biden is a serious threat to democracy. Now, I believe that that assertion can be proven to be absolute BS. And it proves that the former president is banking on you being as irrationally angry as possible. You can judge it any way you want, but that's his intention. And it worked with conservative media. Check out this.
Why was Merrick Garland prepping for a possible, shootout? Why did agents roll up, guns at the ready? This was not business as usual.
I've been a part of executing multiple search warrants. Nothing about this was standard. It was a siege by land, by sea, by air of Mar-a-Lago.
Authorized armed agents to use deadly force in the Mar-a-Lago raid. That is insane. Is there any justification for that?
Absolutely not.
Pam Bondi wasn't in the FBI. Here's what the FBI says, okay? Remember who leads the FBI? A Republican named Christopher Wray that everybody loved when Trump picked him. The FBI followed standard protocol in this search, as we do for all search warrants, which includes a standard policy statement limiting the use of deadly force. No one ordered additional steps to be taken, and there was no departure from the norm in this matter. Now, that's from the FBI, but let's be honest. If you don't want it to be true, you'll dismiss that as deep state. But you'll listen to people who have no FBI experience telling you that they think there's no chance for this. You really believe that what was done was going to Mar-a-Lago to try to kill Trump? You really believe we saw anything that resembles that at all? And you're going to say, no, I don't think so. Then start thinking, well, why would they play like this? Why would you want to weaponize this type of suggestion? Because that's where we are in the two-party game. The other side is evil. That's the game Trump is playing. Will he win? We'll see. But I want you to know the reality. Jennifer Coffindaffer worked at the FBI long enough to degree any kind of tenure you want to define, okay? FBI agent, NewsNation law and justice contributor. Jen, thank you for joining me. Has nothing to do with politics. I never drag you into that. I keep you pure, my friend. So when it comes to how it works, what is your assessment of how this went down in terms of instructions on use of force?
Very simply, Chris, it doesn't matter whether we are going to conduct a search warrant at a plumber's house, at Diddy's house, or at Mar-a-Lago. It's a operations plan must be prepared that we refer to as a SMEAC. It describes the situation, the mission, the execution, the administration, and the communications that are going to be used. In every SMEAC, there is the FBI's use of force policy. It's written, and prior to going on the operation, it's discussed. The legal attorney or the attorney for that FBI called a CDC comes in and goes over it and makes it very clear. Everyone knows that you are justified to use lethal force if your life or the life of another is in jeopardy of severe bodily damage or death. The president doesn't order an FBI agent to do that. Your supervisor doesn't order that. That is something that is dictated by the circumstance you're in.
So the suggestion that, nope, this is different, Jennifer. They never do this. And this situation would never have called for this. So somebody was preparing to go in loaded for bear in this specific situation. Do you buy that?
I do not buy that. That is just inaccurate. And in fact, I will say this was deemed as a low-profile execution of this search warrant. What does that mean? That means they did not don raid jackets. You didn't see M4s slung. You didn't see that at all. This was low profile, and they even a notified Secret Service, which of course they should have, a couple hours in advance to avoid any sort of situation. And they made sure that President Trump, former President Trump, was not even in the state to avoid confrontation.
Jennifer Coffindaffer, thank you very much for just saying it the way it is from your experience on the job. Appreciate you. I'll talk to you again soon. All right. Now, you want to get in the weeds. Now we're going to get in the weeds. Now we need to get after it, okay? Big report comes out of the House committee looking into the pandemic and the origins of COVID-19. They have a guy that they believe was working for Tony Fauci, who was hiding all kinds of communications, playing with his email, trying to make it hard to detect what they were doing with types of research. What is in that report? And what does it all mean about what I think matters most? When are the people in power going to call for an independent review of everything that happened in the pandemic? Two great experts, a guy who's on the committee and a guy who helped during the pandemic running the CDC. We got the science, we got the politics. Next. It's time to get after it. And by it, I mean pushing for what no one seems to want. A complete review of the pandemic. The decisions made starting with the Trump administration all the way through to today. Not just to learn from the past, but to prepare for the next. Like these reports of bird flu spreading more than anticipated, being found in livestock that could signal a bird-borne virus that spreads to other animals in a way that we haven't dealt with before, perhaps. No hype, no panic, at least not yet. But we need to learn the lessons because let's face it, if there were a new scare, do you think there would be consensus in this country about complying with any guidance? Why? Because there's a lack of trust. What would help regain trust? A review and accountability for what was right and wrong in the pandemic. It can only help. But it's not easy to get politicians from these two parties to focus on anything they can't blame on the other one. So far, we can't even get past the origin story of where COVID came from. Now, largely because China won't let us get the answer. But there hasn't been a lot of curiosity compared to what both parties seem to want to investigate about each other, right? That said, today there was news. The House Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic released a 35-page memo presenting what they say is overwhelming evidence that a top advisor to Dr. Anthony Fauci, who's named Dr. David Morenz at the NIH, deleted records critical to uncovering the origins of COVID and used a secret back channel to evade transparency. The memo claims Morenz not only undermined the U.S. government and unlawfully deleted emails, but it raises another question. Now, obviously, and this is my opinion, and the two gentlemen that I'm about to speak to, certainly the congressman, will not agree, and that's good. It's a good conversation to have. I believe Tony Fauci is being set up as a boogeyman. They believe that Tony Fauci was in the loop and is part of this perfidy, this unfaithfulness. Do they have proof of that? The report says Fauci, quote, may have even engaged in federal records violations himself. To me, the language suggests that they don't have that claim substantiated. And I think that matters because maybe Morenz was a guy acting on his own accord and in ways that sound really dumb. Now, if it sounds like I'm dubious about Fauci's role in creating COVID, it's because I am. I've seen no proof of him making money off backdoor research deals or that anything that the United States may have funded as research in China in that lab could have even become COVID-19. But I also think that the origin of the pandemic matters. And we've had two consecutive administrations not get answers. At least Congress is trying. And now we need them to get behind an independent review, a la the 9/11 Commission, to look back and forward. So let's discuss the news and the need for a next in terms of effort. We have House Pandemic Committee member, Georgia Republican Representative Rich McCormick. Thank you very much for being with us, Representative. I know you had a vote. Thank you very much. It's good for you to make time. And the CDC director under President Trump during the pandemic, of course, Dr. Robert Redfield. Good to have you back, Doc. Thank you very much. I'm going to be calling on you a lot because we need your perspective. So, first, on the political side and what you think you found. Significance of today, Congressman.
Well, first of all, let me just say that this is personal to me. I was an ER doctor in the entire pandemic, working night shifts in the ER. I watched people die. I watched real impact of this on my community, so it is very personal to me. Secondly, as we pull the string and watch this unravel, as we go from politician to bureaucrat to Fauci, and what we found is basically a cover-up of immense proportions, where people were changing of the way they worded things and extra symbols and stuff like that to avoid FOIA inquiries, used personal accounts on things that were definitely all professional. They were they're literally conspiring about covering up the actual facts. We still have not found out where the origins were, because we pretty much know. China wouldn't cover it up if it weren't nefarious to begin with. People wouldn't have disappeared if it wasn't nefarious to begin with. It wouldn't have started in the same place as the Wuhan Institute, which requested funding for gain of function. And we've never found it in an animal reservoir. Let's be clear about that. And it doesn't just disappear. That's scientific. So we know it's there. But to see people actually covering it up and actually watch this 45,000 pages worth of emails that these poor lawyers have to pour over to find all these hidden innuendos and actual factual misleading statements that we're catching people in, there's going to be hell to pay when we actually get to the bottom of this, and I think we're getting close.
Now, my understanding to this point, because I've heard of the Marenz stuff before, you had some more documents to put meat on the bones of it today, but thus far it's fairly isolated to him and two other guys, right? But not Tony Fauci yet.
So remember, this is his senior advisor. And you also had Tabak, who admitted to gain of function just last week. And then you have Dr. Daszak, who also was illegitimizing his grant requests and the procurement process also changed. So you're right. You could say individually they're wrong. But all these people link back to Fauci, and Fauci knows he's not a dumb guy. He understands where the gain of function was actually taking place. If he's approaching this from a scientific standpoint, he understands that this came from Wuhan, from a lab that we did fund, and maybe he didn't authorize the gain of function, but he certainly should be transparent about what did happen and how it happened, which he keeps on denying, and that's the problematic problem. If he would just come out and say, yeah, we said they shouldn't have done that, but they did it anyway, and yes, we did give them money for that, we kind of knew they were going to do that, it would be over. It's always a cover-up.
Well, it wouldn't be over, right? Because it would just be on to the next thing. I believe that Fauci is being used as a substitute for China because you guys can't get at China. But I do believe you're acting in good faith, and I'm happy to have the conversation, and I think they're important questions. Let's bring in Redfield on this. My understanding, Doc, and as you know, it was true at CNN, it's true here. You can disagree with me about whatever it is. You guys know more, you know better. That's why I want you here, and I want you to be a service to the audience. Doc, my understanding is that the U.S. government didn't finance any research at the Wuhan lab that could have become COVID-19. They may have been funding gain-of-function research, but not on any virus that could have been COVID-19. What's your take on that?
Well, I think if you look officially at the grants and what they propose to do, that the grant in question, particularly the one from USAID, your comment would be true. The challenge we have, Chris, is that there was a lot of money that went to that lab from USAID.
Yes.
And it's not really specified exactly how it was used. There was a lot of money that went to that lab from DOD, and we don't know how that was used. And there was a lot of money that went to that lab from the Department of State. You are right, though, if the official grant that NIAID funded did not directly fund research that would had led to that virus. The problem is, and Peter Daszak admitted this last week in his testimony, is he finally was admitted that there's many viruses, COVID viruses, that this lab has that have never seen the light of day. So we don't really know the inventory of the viruses they have.
You know what I was thinking about earlier, Representative McCormick, and I'm glad that you reminded people that you're also a physician, because I've always seen you as a little bit special in that regard, because you know both sides of the equation. What do you think of the idea of getting a panel of people that have some kind of vetting mechanism, but they're not in office, okay? So you can't just see them as having party first, and going through all of these questions and more. Ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, was keeping people away from them early on the right call. I know it was based on early research, but did anything change after that? The vaccine. How did we feel about Operation Warp Speed? What was good? What was bad about it? What do you think about these injuries that we're hearing about now? Should we be doing more? Is long COVID real? They're putting all this money into it, but they never talk about it. Don't you think to get the American people behind something like the next one, if it's this bird flu, which I know we shouldn't be too panicked about, but I'll ask you guys about it in a second. Don't you think a commission that is not partisan would be really helpful in regaining trust among the American people, Congressman?
So I agree with your premise, and I do think we should have a nonpartisan, objective look at this. But I also challenge the premise in general because it's very difficult nowadays in our current society to find people who are truly nonpartisan. Even the people who claim to be moderates in Congress tend to be pretty partisan when we come to voting and ideology. I think this is what it comes back down to: what makes America great? What makes it unique? And that is when each individual gets to disagree. When you don't agree with the government, you get to talk to your physician, and you actually get to make a decision yourself on what's best for you. And the biggest problem with I've seen on all this debate is that we keep on turning to the government to find the experts instead of turning to our doctors and actually having discussions, which, by the way, each doctor may have a different occurrence and a different opinion. But what happens is when we get to have that discussion without involving politicians, then we have a much better discovery of facts and science. But as soon as you politicize it, and even a nonpartisan commission is going to have politicization just by nature, being in D.C. But if we let the doctors have dispute and studies that aren't contaminated. Yeah, but the difference is 9/11, we were a unique position where we're talking about one bad guy, and actually people were getting along. The problem is right now we have a distinct distrust of the government. Now, if you want to talk about the 9/11 Commission and about what we're supposed to be doing on the border, well, have we really solved the problem? Are we really following the recommendations of the 9/11 Convention, which we're not? And so I want to get to the bottom of this, and I want to make sure that we have individuals having control of their own destiny the next time. That's my biggest concern, is that we don't know what it's going to be. We don't know if it's going to be a virus, meningitis, bacteria, fungi, whatever it's going to be. But let the doctors weigh in without political contamination and federal oversight that stifles any discussion and debate.
I agree with all of that, with due respect to Dr. Redfield. Dr. Redfield, on the issue of what we're seeing in the headlines now about a bird flu, you made an interesting point. Bird flu, I'm not so worried. We've seen it before. The farmers get it. It sticks within that. But you're seeing a couple of things here that you do want to keep an eye on. What are those and why, sir?
Well, again, I think, for our own nation, when I think of national security, Chris, I'm going to make an argument that the greatest threat to our national security right now is biosecurity. And a good example of it is what's going to come, the next pandemic. If people didn't think pandemics can cause problems with the way of life in America, just look back at what I call the lesser pandemic, the little COVID pandemic we had. Bird flu has the potential to really cause the great pandemic. And eventually, I think it will. It takes 5 amino acid changes for the virus that currently is in birds to learn how to efficiently transmit the human to human. Right now, it rarely goes from bird to a human, or in this case we saw today in the New York Times, a cattle to a human, but it doesn't go human to human. And so it's sort of dead end, and as you point, it's not something to worry. But if it was to change those 5 amino acids, then it would go human to human. And the bird flu cases we've had, particularly among chicken farmers and in Southeast Asia, there's been about probably 600 to 800 cases. It has about a 40% mortality. It's a bad disease.
Yeah, nasty.
Now, as this virus changes, it may change its mortality. The reason I'm a little concerned is that right now it's in 26 different mammal species in the United States. All right. Whereas, 10 years ago, it was in turkeys and chickens and birds. Okay. Right. So